morning and welcome to Sport for Business, where we're joined this morning rather excitedly by the gentleman at the head of Cricket Ireland, who yesterday discovered that Ireland has been named as a preferred co-host for the ICC's T20 Cricket World Cup in 2030. Warren Deutrom, you're very welcome back to Sport for Business.
Thank you very much indeed, Rob. Pleasure to be here as always.
You flew back in from the Emirates and watching the Cricket World Cup between Australia and New Zealand over the weekend. But the big win for Ireland came on Monday when the ICC board did confirm this status of preferred co-hosts. Tell us, how close is that to becoming World Cup hosts?
It's a very good question. There probably is a key distinction, which is that the ICC has been through the process to identify where they feel the hosts most obviously satisfy all the criteria that were put out, which would be largely, number one, do they have the ability to do it? Number two, do they have the requisite support from key stakeholders domestically? Number three, is it the right time of year based on when cricket would be played? Is there a sufficient spread among all of the members who have applied? And also, assuming the ICC is going to be putting out its strategy in the coming period, is it aligned with those strategic objectives, particularly in relation to ensuring that the game is able to take a sufficient foothold in key emerging markets? And I think probably the headline there is the US being a co-host alongside the West Indies. So those were really, really important considerations for the game. And obviously for us, the one there that perhaps enables there to be regarded as a little bit further to go would be in relation to ticking all the boxes about providing comfort to all parties, including the co-hosts, that all the hosting arrangements are sorted out in significant detail. There is a draft host agreement which ICC would have circulated to all of the members in advance, but there are slight quirks that would be particular to each environment. So whether it be around security, around taxation, around medical, who pays for what, marketing, what are the requirements that which are placed upon the group known as authorities. The authorities would be governments, local authorities, anyone who isn't a cricket member. So those are not insignificant considerations, but the very fact of being now nominated as a preferred co-host means that we can have those discussions, or we can commence those discussions in earnest. I think probably the final thing to say as well is that given we're talking about an event 9 years hence, we kind of don't know what's going to happen in between. So therefore, it's best probably that we allow some of the next ICC rights cycle to commence, or the planning for that to commence in the next 12 to 18 months, so we can begin to see what some of the emerging themes which may well impact upon hosting arrangements in future.
It is the case, though, that cricket is now sitting at the very top table. So as a full member of the International Cricket Council, it is perhaps not surprising that Ireland is being mentioned in relation to this. It is to co-host with England, Scotland and Wales. And of course, we have been in that position before. We hosted a Cricket World Cup game back in 1999, I think it was, in Clontarf. But you've already had some pre-discussions with government. We wrote last week about the prospect of this happening. Didn't quite expect it to be as soon as this, but government is well disposed towards it.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, we began our discussions with government as early as the beginning of last year, in January, February 2020, and that was on the back of discussions I had with my counterparts in England and Scotland, talking about this as a proper opportunity. We obviously knew that ICC was looking forward to sort of arranging its major events for the future. And we clearly saw this as an opportunity. So we commenced those discussions with my counterparts in those two countries. And we were aware that ICC was quite keen to explain its new hosting process around its events and to do a tour of the members. So we use that as an opportunity to introduce the then chief exec and commercial director of ICC, to senior principals in the Department of Sport. And we had those discussions last year. And ICC began to outline the timeline. And we've had some conversations with the government since then. And then real momentum began as the ICC began to get into its bidding timeline and bidding process around expressing initial support. And then once we had expressed initial support and ICC said, yes, we think you have Scotland and England should go through to the next stage. The next stage then became a submission of an awful lot of information, much more granular information around all things which are usually common to all bids, around venues, around taxation, around government engagement, etc., etc. And that process gained momentum over the last couple of months. I think from the government perspective, Rob, you quite rightly said, this has all happened rather quickly. There have been some compressed timelines. ICC is keen to get out into the marketplace in the coming weeks with its sales of its events, and working backwards, they then had to ensure, well, where are those events going to be, and what is the size and scale and quantity of those events? So all of those have been done in a stepwise fashion. And I think the government, because of that speed, has said, look, we're really keen to support. We certainly want to give you our in principle support, but we kind of need to understand a little bit more about what we're signing up for. We haven't had the opportunity maybe to do sort of really deep dive on economic impact surveys, potential cost. What is the hosting agreement requiring of us in terms of cost? And of course, there's the other not insignificant factor of the potential for a football World Cup in the same year, in the same period of the year as well, around summer 2030. So all of those are factors which understandably are said to the government, look, you have our in-principle support. We just kind of need to know a little bit more about what we're signing up for in proper commitment.
Well, I've just cleared the diary entirely for the summer of 2030. There wasn't an awful lot in there, I got to be honest with you. But as you say, it is some way away. In terms of the actual locations, now, obviously, England, well, not obviously, but one assumes that England would be the lead bidder on this, that if the World Cup final is going to be played, it's more likely to be Lords than Malahide. But in terms of the venues in Ireland, we've got Malahide, Clontarf, Stormont in the north and Brady in the north, and the potential of a national stadium on the Sport Ireland campus, which has been mooted and discussed now for a number of years. Is this the kind of thing which might accelerate those discussions?
I think it's fair to say we certainly hope so. You've quite rightly identified, Rob, it's a subject we have been discussing with the Irish government for years now. We have obviously been trying to push the Irish government to give us some significant funding. Those discussions, you'll probably recall the day after I returned from hearing about our full membership, we had Brendan Griffin in the room, and I once again urged a significant shout out to the government to provide us with the means to support our permanent infrastructure objectives. That following year, you'll recall when we hosted India for those two memorable games at Malahide under the glorious cloudless skies. We had a message from the then Taoiseach Leo Varadkar at the start of our programme saying he was fully aware of our plans to develop permanent infrastructure at the National Sports Campus in form of a stadium, and he said his government would lend their genuine support to helping that dream become a reality. 3.5 years down the line, we're still, pushing that very significantly. It really is genuinely a massive drain on our resources to have to continue to host international cricket on greenfield sites. It is millions of euros that we wish could be invested directly in the sport itself. So we do significantly hope that this announcement today is going to give genuine momentum to those discussions.
It is indeed very exciting. Like, part of it as well, watching the World Cup that's just concluded out in the Emirates, part of it is the excitement of those day-night matches where you're playing under floodlights. Clearly, none of the stadia we have here have got floodlights at the moment. Is that something that would be possible for the national stadium?
Oh, I think if you are developing something from scratch, it's best you don't look at current minimum standards. I think what you're trying to build something which is going to last 20, 25 years, and you have to try and think about what are currently the elements of an international stadium which are regarded as best in class, because in about 5 to 10 years' time, they will be merely minimum standards. And so our view would be that we should be absolutely looking along the lines of permanent infrastructure, which would be electronic screens, probably electronic perimeter advertising, floodlights. I think what you do is you start with, well, if we had a blank check, what would we do? And I think what you then do is you start off with a vision of what you would eventually like to have, and then you phase the investment in it as you go along. But best not to develop things on an organic basis based on where your sport currently is, but it's probably best to develop a vision for where you would wish the sport to be in 20, 25 years, and make sure that you are developing according to a master plan with a vision, as opposed to one that's developed organically as you go along.
I kind of love the idea of winning the right to host the World Cup in 9 or 10 years' time, and then already planning for when it'll be coming back again in 25 years' time. Of course, one of those things that you might wish to consider is, and I'm not quite sure of the arc of a cricket ball off of a well-struck hit, but maybe a roof on the stadium might be appropriate for the Irish summer weather, although perhaps climate change is going to impact on that as well. Well, look, I tell you, the impact or the arc of the ambition that Cricket Ireland has shown in relation to this has certainly been matched by the results. We know that there are many a slip between cup and lip, but it looks at the moment as if Ireland is in prime position to host the Cricket World Cup in 2030, which is very exciting indeed. And thank you to Warren Deutrom for taking the time to fill us in on some of the details. We will be back to you.
Great pleasure, Rob. Thank you.